मैंने वीडियो ऑफ कर दिया
आवाज आमाते आवशे
ट्राई करो
Are we admitting them? Fine.
Albin, we are admitting them all, right? Yeah.
Okay. Actually, this is like a cinema, no? Everybody rushing in. You know, in some sense, you know, online. Yeah, it's like a gates open and, you know, very nice here.
इसमें खबर पड़े तो क्या लोग आया सब sound
May we request Professor Jay to help us with the welcome note?
the problem
Hey. Hi, Percy. Hi, Ruturaj.
yes
Hi, welcome on board.
thank you
Can we have all those people who have joined in? You know, it'll be great to have videos on so that at least we can see who all are here. You know, in this at least this virtual world. You know, at least we can see each other's faces. You know, though we might be kind of quite far away, but it'll be great to, you know, at least know each other. Yeah, nice to see slowly the videos kind of popping in and, you know, everybody kind of turning up over here. One of the good part about essentially the Zoom is that you don't need to ask somebody's name, you know. So at least in the physical space, when you meet somebody, you know, it is quite possible that you might you might forget their name a lot of time, At least over here, the names are kind of visible, so at least we know to whom we are talking to. You know? Except somebody, actually nobody is here, but otherwise there are times when we get a lot of people where it is iPhone, Samsung, so we wonder, people have changed their names to the phones. We're just waiting for one or two more people to basically kind of come in, become part of the session. Though we would want to start, but just a minute. I thought it will be nicer to kind of at least, say hi to people. So I could see quite a few people whom I know. Hey, hi Megal. Long time, Yeah, otherwise we would generally bump on the canteen, Now this is how you generally bump into people, right? There are few more basically joining in, so we'll wait for 1 or 2 minutes and then we can kind of begin. Hey, hi Shivangi. So I also saw Mustafa join in, there's still a lot of people who are kind of quite a camera shy people, and would not start their cameras, at this point. I wonder why, So it has generally this it's like being backbench, like people who sit in the behind, the backbenchers, who kind of start, who are there but not there, kind of things. So good to see. At least we can only think that we can see are generally your thumbnails, and it's like your passport photos. I see people with masks, so people are joined from the office, right, Mansi? People following the protocols. Yeah.
She must have been suspecting that I'll be here.
Quite possible, So, I see people also, like, there are times when people actually also in the car, like I've attended a lot of sessions in which, you're in the car and, um, or there are times when people actually attend sessions when they are in hospitals, and, I've seen somebody who's about to get into operation, but had to attend one of the meetings, and then they excuse this. So in some sense, I kind of like it that, the online has allowed people to connect in many ways at this point. So just to give you a kind of a glimpse of how we're going to basically begin this entire session, so that you guys have a little more clarity towards it. So we have a virtual lighting of the lamp. Now I remember when people used to have this, used to go to Tirupati, and says, oh, you can do the puja virtually there, And I used to wonder, it's like, this is long back years, when people used to do that. But now this is the kind of reality. So we'll virtually kind of light a lamp, have an introduction to the exhibition. We'll have Ruturaj Parikh, who's with us, who will talk a bit about exhibition, and Percy will actually take you in a walkthrough, through the exhibition. And post that, we plan to have a kind of a dialogue, discussions, debate, discourse, arguments, some kind of an actions where people have questions, to follow, and it'll be great to have a kind of an engagement at that point, after you see the exhibition, and what are your thoughts and how does one want to largely basically go about this, right? So let me just check if Payal is ready. Payal, are we ready with and Harsh, are we ready with the lighting of the lamp? Yeah, then we can begin.
Hi. So I have known Percy Pithawala since I was a student at the Institute of Environmental Design in Vidyanagar, where I was fortunate to have studied under him from the second semester all the way through thesis. He was a very influential teacher, and he continues to have this very profound influence on me and my practice and the way I think. I therefore want to thank him. I want to thank CEPT for this opportunity to introduce this exhibition and to recognize this very critical milestone in his prolific career, where you can almost see a critical cut of his work, his drawings, his models, and his very expressive visual assemblages. Before we venture into the analysis of the exhibition, I want to draw everybody's attention to two critical details. Firstly, I want to recognize the deep influence that Percy Sir's mother, Dolly Pithawala, who was an art teacher and an artist, had on him. She encouraged him to work with abstract graphics and drawings from a very early age, doodles, marks on paper, things like that. And his early set of drawings called the strawberry drawings were these very deeply layered, dabs of color on paper. In his youth, he was in New York. He was studying at Pratt, and he was influenced by the works of Libus Woods, who is an international icon, and his very, very energetic drawings of dystopian post-war cities. He was also influenced by Professor William Making, who used to run Architectural Futures, which is an elective Percy still runs in his studios. And through this elective, he came to understand the connections between the disciplines of art, visual culture, and architecture. And these formative times continue to influence his work and his practice. This exhibition can be seen as a critical collection of Percy's work. At the beginning of the exhibition, we can encounter a set of paintings and multimedia images. And these very expressive, energetic, and layered sort of drawings represent his ability to articulate the abstract. It's like a visual field. These are like sort of frames of the visual field that are confined and yet delimited by the canvas on which they are drawn. They are also imaginative pieces of work that extend way beyond the confines of the frame, and they have this almost this three-dimensionality to them. And one can almost appreciate the fiddling impatience of his hand and his ability to juxtapose complex ideas through these constructs. We are also able to engage with certain influences that Percy has, especially from the 20th century movements of Russian constructivism and painters like Casimir Malevich, Liszewski, and the artists of the Dutch digital movement. These works are displayed in the exhibition. These are improvisations on their works that kind of they form the conceptual background of a lot of Percy's work, almost an underlay. And Professor Pithawala says, and I quote, there is always a possibility that once the work of art has outlived its function, it may further disintegrate, leaving a faint trace of its existence. And one can almost see these faint traces of these masters behind his work. They extend across the entire exhibition, including the architectural projects and proposals that are presented here. The recent work that Percy Pithawala has produced through his multidisciplinary practice titled The Red Studio is sort of at the interface between art, architecture, and visual practice. And this particular exhibition has a couple of his competition entries, ideas competitions that he has participated in. The one winning entry for the Guggenheim Reimagined competition, which envisions the Guggenheim Museum on the iconic site where Frank Lloyd Wright's building currently stands, to be a downward spiral into the abyss, almost a 300-meter kind of spiral into the abyss of the earth. And the second one, which notably, I mean, in this particular exhibition, is the competition for the reconstructed spire of the Notre Dame, which is also sort of this enigma kind of a proposal, almost represents the skeleton of what used to be. So I do look forward to engaging with the exhibition and the space, and I do encourage students, young architects, and professionals to do the same, because it may take time to absorb this incredible collection. To conclude, I want to share a little bit of my thinking on the significance of Professor Pithawala's work in the context of contemporary architecture and practice in India. First, I think I recognize his practice to be an interdisciplinary practice that enables the process of design to be free from dogma and to take its unique trajectory involving conscious and subconscious explorations. I think his practice is a practice in the visual realm. It delimits the prerogative of non-objective art and objective and functional obligations of architecture, and it finds almost like a middle ground between the two, a new hybrid in some sense, and it is speculative and it's very radical in its imagination. I think it's an important practice in teaching and pedagogy through a model of collaborative work, wherein the studio becomes almost like a workshop or a laboratory where he engages with the students to co-create and co-author these beautiful competitions and imaginary projects. And finally, it's a practice in engaging with new mediums of representing space, whether it is through these multi-layered collages, drawings, assemblages, or through digital work recently that he has created using an array of softwares and tools that finally come alive in this sort of a three-dimensional space. So I do hope this exhibition, organized virtually for the uncanny times that we are in, will enable students and young practitioners to engage with this this sort of extremely energetic and agile process of thinking, and a rigorous way of expression that is so unique to Professor Percy Pithawala and his practice through the Red Studio. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to my show, Constructions. Art has always been my inspiration while conceiving concepts for building projects. I'm particularly drawn to constructivist paintings of Malevich, Roshenko, L. Lissitzky, and many, many more for their strong geometric compositions extending into infinite space. By extruding a two-dimensional painting into a three-dimensional spatial construct, I am further able to articulate volumes and journeys within them. Exhibition opens with a section dedicated to my initial explorations based on Russian artist Malevich's constructivist compositions. His geometric compositions extending into third and fourth dimensions of space has left a lasting impression on evolution of my thinking process in architecture and space making. This process is also reflected in my practice, wherein I tend to easily drift between multiple layers of thoughts and various points of departures in search of newer meanings and revelations. Whenever I undertake a professional assignment, my mind spontaneously recollects an artwork which I appropriate onto the given site. It is almost as though over the years I have made a data bank of visual imagery which I recollect at my free will as and when a suitable opportunity arises for implementing the same in order to kickstart the design process. During the process of further working, a diagram of possible interrelationships gets woven together out of concerns for site references, visual connections, accessibility, etc. During this entire process, the work of art serves the function of a compositional matrix, which helps tie up various individual layers of the design process, such as site, program, circulation, structure, and landscape. Participation in national and international design ideas competitions is critical to our practice. This entire exhibition wall includes several competitions submitted over the past year and a half. Amongst them are the award-winning competition entries for Guggenheim Reimagined in New York City, as well as the competition project for redesigning the spire for Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Our first competition, the Guggenheim Repository, we call it. Our competition entry takes its inspiration from the spiral ramp ambulatory of the iconic Guggenheim designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. We have attempted to reinterpret the descent of the spiral and extended it further deep down 300 meters into the surface of the ground. Descending spiral ambulatory accommodates temporary art galleries at its perimeter, while upper floors with larger footprints accommodates the permanent galleries. Through this approach, we have been able to open up a much needed pedestrian plaza space within the high-rise density of Manhattan. The second competition project is the Kids Factory in Italy, floated by YAC International Design Competition. The competition brief for Kids Factory emphasized the need to reimagine a variety of spaces conducive for children's psychological development and well-being. These are all to be accommodated within an abandoned factory shed. Our proposal, Curiosity Constructs, proposes several careful interventions comprising of playful follies embedded within the existing structural framework of the factory. These follies serve as stimulation chambers, which arouses the curiosity amongst children, thereby enabling them to further their growth through engagement and experiences within these spaces. For the Guggenheim Reimagine competition, we had floated 2 entries. This is the second entry for the Guggenheim Reimagine competition, the tall building typology. In this proposal, we have gone diametrically opposite and proposed a tall skyscraper at the edge of Central Park to house the Guggenheim Museum. Our proposal attempts to redefine museum typology as a skyscraper, a set of organic bubble-shaped volumes in varied sizes are interspersed within a gridded scaffold structure. While navigating between these volumes at multiple levels, one passes through garden spaces overlooking the scenic expanse of the Central Park. The public plaza at ground level maintains porosity, thereby allowing unhindered movement of pedestrians. One of the last projects on this wall is redesigning the spire of Notre Dame Cathedral. It was floated by Rethinking the Future design competition. Our proposal attempts to resurrect the spire like a phoenix arising from the ashes of its destruction. The image of the blazing fire continues to remain etched in the memories of people for generations. We believed that any act of building must take into consideration this powerful notion of the presence of the absence. We envisaged emergence of a new spire as a participatory project for the city. A glass cone reminiscent of the original spire caps the void left by its absence. Further, a system of scaffolding pixelates gradually as it encircles the cone, creating a blurred silhouette of the spire visible from across the skyline of Paris, thereby becoming a new icon for the city of Paris. This section of display explores the interactive process of deciphering and decoding various aspects and layers of paintings, graphics into possibilities for reimagining architectural and spatial constructs. Student project models undertaken by them during workshops on art and architecture at the Red Studio are interspersed together with a few of my own projects, including the CII Center for Management in Bangalore, which underlies a continued commitment to promote a larger understanding about interrelationships between art and architecture. the Taj Amity Pavilion Design Ideas Competitions at Mumbai. This was a competition floated by Arc Dias International Design Competition in order to commemorate the event and of the terror event which had happened at the Gateway of India. Our proposal attempts to resurrect the disruption and chaos which arises from an act of terror at site and the subsequent healing and reintegration of communal fabric that follows after the terror incidents. This process of gradual disintegration and reconstitution is enacted at the site in an abstracted notion through transformation of the arches from the Gateway of India, which is in the vicinity of the proposal. This section includes some of our earlier competition entries. We have adapted the technique of collage, superimposition of different layers into this competition entries. Notable amongst them are the Mandu Follies and the Indian Architect and Builder Vision 2050. Indian Architect and Builder submission entry envisaged a set of 4 constructs based on the themes of unbuildable, unbelievable, ridiculous, and the sublime. Each individual construct comprised of an assemblage of an image of artwork by a master artist, my own interpretation of the same image, and a found object appropriate to the theme were all assembled within a light box. The site of Mandu Follies was envisioned as a palimpsest where histories could be written and rewritten. The city of Mandu is envisaged as a theatrical stage set to propose vital inserts at various strategic locations within its vast cultural landscape. This project was submitted as our entry for the Yokohama Art Triennale. Upon my return from New York, my first solo art show held at the Faculty of Fine Arts in Baroda comprised of a series of artworks and installations which was titled Improvisations. Discourse from these artworks was initiated by placing an art postcard of a Russian constructivist painter Malevik's original painting right in the center of the format of the page. Taking inspiration from the structure and composition of Malevik's artwork, I further attempted to evolve my own expression by extending reference lines, color, and energy fields flowing out of the picture frame. With regards to our practice, a similar process of abstraction through artworks has been implemented with varying degrees of success. Artworks displayed in this section are some of my earliest explorations. I have always been interested in evolving a structural framework with non-contesting balancing of parts, a holistic format in which all individual compositional units are equal and inseparable from the whole, and the surface appears to be in perfect unity. Hence, the title of the show, Constructions. Through these artworks, I have attempted to explore the surface of the picture plane as an ultimate field of vision, an utopian tendency in abstraction as advocated by the suprematist art movement, which employs a visual vocabulary of flat picture planes, etched surfaces, chance happenings, and assemblages. Library in the Park, a book studio, a competition floated by Switch International. We submitted 2 entries for this project. The first entry, we intended to weave together nature and knowledge. An elevated bridge ambulatory hovers above the ground, allowing unhindered access to the park goers on the ground plane. A set of cuboidal volumes plugged into the bridge ambulatory serves as reading and interactive spaces. An inherent flexibility in structural system further allows linear extensions in multiple configurations while negotiating the landscape of the central park. The second proposal seeks to redefine notion of library as a conservatory of knowledge set within the context of Central Park. Library is envisaged as an all year round thriving public space with ease of access and movement. A set of stairs overlooking the conservatory into the park connects at various levels and also serve as informal interactive spaces. Library has been envisaged to promote opportunities for dissemination and creation of new forms of knowledge set within the verdant environment of the park.
Thank you very much, Percy. It was kind of quite intriguing, the entire basically walkway, and we would have loved if we could have actually done this in physical space, actually with you around, taking all of us at this point. I really was enamored by this whole idea, that how do you make people experience what is not there in a conscious manner? I thought that was a kind of a very interesting thing. And with the Notre Dame, basically, where the idea of memory of fire, so the idea of what it is there and what it has gone by, I thought that was kind of quite interesting. Now, before we kind of begin into the entire series of Q&A, with everyone, I thought I'll just basically do a little brief formality of thanking people at this point. So we will have a debate, discussion, sessions, discourse, which will be largely geared by Ruturaj Parikh, who's the founder, director of Matter Studio in Goa, and he was also the director for the Charles Correa Foundation. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank with us, Arthur Duff, because Arthur was the person who was the head of the library earlier, and he introduced Percy to this whole idea of exhibition, and we are planning to do this physical, and then now we are moved to the virtual part of the exhibition. This entire exhibition would not have happened without the help of the entire CEPT exhibition team. So Payal, Dan, Harsh Bhausar, and Nidhi Badrakia, who's part of the team who really puts all of this together, put this video, put this entire walkway, and put these things together. So they are like a heart and soul, who really basically brings this at this point. Now, in this time, it is very important to also tell people what we are doing. So our communication team, which is there, so Hemant and Kinjal and the rest of the communication team, who really tell people that this is the show that we are putting up, and I would like to thank them. And most important, and something people who are largely basically kind of forgotten, who are always at the back end of putting things together. So the CEPT administration team, which is there, our finance team, who basically makes sure the nitty-gritties and everything is largely basically taken care of, our IT team, who makes sure that things are in place, and the Autelia team on the platform on which this entire thing is going. But what I would really like is when somebody goes through the entire exhibition, you may also want to look at the credits, because this entire exhibition would not have happened without the entire team of Percy, all the students, all the people, designers, everybody who worked with Percy in order to basically put this, and Percy has been the kind of a gearing force, in taking this largely further. Just to let you know that we will be doing many more such events at this point at CEPT Exhibition Center. So we have started this whole series of online exhibitions which are going to come. So just to give you a little bit brief glimpse on what we are looking at, possibly within this 2021, another exhibition which is towards crafting future, looking at some of the projects on terracotta craftspeople of Gundyali. We will be also hosting the Excellence Award exhibition, and then we will be doing an exhibition on conservation, architecture, and art, and then multiple exhibitions will kind of follow up at this point. So in this entire sort of new normal, we have kind of adopted, this way of communicating our thoughts, ideas, information to a larger set of people. The good part about this is that it also creates a kind of a knowledge bank and a repository for all of us. So I would like to hand over the entire session to Ruturaj. Also, I may want to basically tell everyone that we have left the chat box open, so if anybody who wants to basically ask some of the questions, we'll be more than happy if you actually ask physically, basically talk to us. But at some point, if you're a little shy or you have another set of things, one can also basically put your questions in the chat box and we'll kind of try that to take it on. I hand over the mic to Ruturaj.
Thanks, Jay, and thanks, Percy sir, for the walkthrough. When the first time when Harsh and Payal had taken us around the exhibition, we couldn't really see. I personally couldn't see the images in a good resolution, so I was always struggling to imagine what's really on those walls. And I think after this, it will be open for people to see. So I mean, the little I've known Percy sir's work, I have always appreciated that these images are very not mine. Sorry, these images are very these drawings are very evocative at the real scale, because some of them are very small, and there's little frames that have layers and layers in them, and some of them are quite large. So unless you encounter them in a certain proximity, which is like a sort of exhibition space, which unfortunately we cannot do at this point, I was always afraid that it may take a little bit away from the experience. But now, since I could see that walkthrough and the human scale and the eye level and the walls, and I really find it very I feel that it's there's great justice done to this work, even in this medium. Just to start the conversation, like I said, I've known Percy sir and his work since I was a student. He was our faculty, and he was very influential, not just as a teacher, but also as somebody. What happens with students in India, especially when you are in your you graduate from your 10th and 12th standard, you kind of move from being a non-visual person, to being a visual person in almost like the first semester of first and second semester of your education. And that was the critical time when we were lucky to have Percy sir in our studio, and that completely changed the way we looked at things. The way that we were able to the way he was able to handhold us through that transition, which I thought was very critical. Sir, I want to ask you, can you tell us a little about your process for the advantage of everybody who have been introduced to your work through this exhibition? How do you initiate a project or an idea or a piece of work, and what is the nature of this process?
Sure. Am I audible? Yeah. My thought process, as was mentioned during the presentation, has largely been guided by art. By art, we may call them artworks, objects of art. So whenever in our practice I take up a professional assignment, my mind would travel back spontaneously and reflect on an artwork which I would consider appropriate to the site. It is almost as if over the years I have built a data bank of visual imagery by visiting the museums and art galleries, which I am able to recollect at my own free will, and that whenever an opportunity arises, I'm able to use it in a way to kickstart the conceptual thinking process. And then further on, that piece of artwork is used as a diagram in order to uncover different layers and possibilities, such as site context, visual vistas, accessibility, etc., etc. So the diagram of an artwork becomes now a much multi-layered kind of an image. And during the entire process, the work of art almost acts as a compositional matrix, which helps me in coordinating these different layers together in the design process of the site, the program, the circulation, the structure, the landscape, etc., etc. Well, there is always a possibility, and I think that would be an ideal situation whereby I start with a particular piece of artwork And then I start imagining volumes of architectural spaces through them, journeys within them. And in the process of doing so, what could happen is a very faint trace of that artwork would remain and everything else would disappear from it. So these are the process which I have tried to use for some of my projects, and that is where that interplay between the way the exhibition was divided initially into some of the artworks and then into competitions. That is how I carry forward, and that is how the two are interrelated together. The act of making this artworks and the act of doing this competitions, because it gives us the essential freedom, this ideas competitions, in order to explore these ideas. So this is the way in which I generally work, and this is what I have tried to figure over the years, what kind of works the best for me. I mean, it may not be the ideal way, or it may not be the best way, but it has worked well for me in order to conceive some exemplary works which I believe would not have been conceived otherwise. So it opens up a lot of possibilities for me, and that is what I'm looking forward to always, a fresh start and a new approach and new meanings with every competition that we take part in and every project that we do.
Thank you, sir. And just sort of a natural segue from that question would be that we in this exhibition we can see that there is there are a lot of two-dimensional works, but I also remember, and I've seen a lot of your three-dimensional works as well, which include acrylic, layers of acrylic, lots of models, continuous explorations and developments through these different mediums, whether it's paper, cardboard, found objects a lot of times. So can you tell us a little bit about the mediums that you work with, and now obviously the digital? Yeah.
As such, I do not have a preferred medium. I mean, as and when I'm doing my work, whatever material is at my disposal, that is what I try to use. As and when I feel an urgent need to draw, it inadvertently starts manifesting itself by drawing over a scratch, a tear on the paper, or a mark which has been left on the surface of a backing sheet for a previous project which has been done, a Xerox of a cross section of a particular project that we have accomplished before, a Xerox of someone else's work which is lying on the table, and that is how the process of marking rigorously on it starts. So there are no preconceived thoughts while working on it. I remain open to chance occurrings and chance happenings, and allow the process to be taken over by it in some way. And I always feel that whenever I followed that process, a very rich, multi-layered drawing emerges out of this churning process of these various thoughts that are going on in my mind, and it eventually assumes a life of its very own. My technique, one could say, over the years has remained more or less consistent, except that over the years, I have been able to add more layers, more superimpositions, and in order to be able to make the diagram more effective and more articulate. Yes, as you rightly mentioned, we do try out different stuffs. When there was a time when we had to submit models for competitions, and that was in fact an ideal time. Nowadays it is this 3D renderings, but there was a time when we had to make models, and that was the fun part of it. Was it used to be a part collage, a part found object, layering and superimposition of several kind of imageries and perspective sheets, layering an imagery of this acrylic boxes that you were talking about. That is what we call the light boxes. There was a competition floated by Indian architect and builder, which is to envision 2050, in which 4 themes were given: the unbuildable, unbelievable, sublime, and energetic. And we try to imagine that each of them could be a light box, which would be sandwiched between 2 sheets of acrylic. We would insert an original artwork. We would insert an artwork which would be my take on the original artwork, as well as a found object which we thought would go relevantly with that particular artwork. And we compressed all of that within a box. We called it the light box. So there have been different ways. For the Guggenheim competition, which we won, with a set of students, I worked on a model wherein we had to imagine a building which was going almost 300 meters deep. I mean, we wanted to make a model which was essentially very fragile and transparent, and it was a sectional model which tried to show how the spiral would descend deep down into the surface of the earth. So we found different ways of making models, different ways of making submissions, different materials to be explored, and there is never a one way of working with all of these. Thank you.
Jay, would you want to solicit some questions from your end, or from if anybody else has some observations, any discussion that you want to?
There are people who have been also kind of putting some questions.
Sure.
So there's a question in the chat which says, how do you decide which is the best approach to be selected out of the variety created based on multiple creations? And how do you approach to find a solution for the same? This is from Pranjal Vyas, to Percy.
The approach, maybe the ways the projects are handled, and maybe the ways, as we discussed in the last question, the way we articulate the project may be different, but the process that we have followed throughout all of these projects has inadvertently been the same. And that is that we have always kick-started the process using an artwork most of the time as a basis, and then try to extrude it and imagine it in 3 dimensions, and then gradually putting in the human scale, imagining us traveling through those spaces, then trying to add the layers of the site context, the vistas and everything, trying to make it relevant on the site. In the process of making it relevant on the site, a lot of things would start disappearing from it, and it would happen that only the party or the trace of that will be left over on the site. So that has remained more or less the same, except for projects like the Notre Dame in particular. That is when we were reading into Peter Eisenman and his theories of the presence of the absence, and we felt that this is the ideal project wherein one could explore that, of something which is there and something which is not there now, something which was there, which was so powerful and which was embedded in the minds of the people, and at one moment it all sudden disappears. So in that case, we try to imagine the silhouette of the spire, which you could see through this very fragile kind of scaffolding. We are trying to build up a tower so that there is an essence of a tower, but it is not necessarily the same tower. Maybe in proportions it remains the same. Maybe because of the scaffolding, we had even imagined, which we later on didn't do it, but we had imagined people climbing up the steps and be able to go up all the way to the spire. So, when we do this competition, we don't let anything hinder us. And that is why, or you imagine the Guggenheim, of course, our very own Frank Lloyd Wright's Guggenheim, and wherein it was so difficult for us that we are working on a site where Frank Lloyd Wright has built, and it is an iconic building, and it has withstood the time. And how do we even propose a new building over there? So wherein we just took a basic aspect of the spiral, and like a spring, we extended the spiral all the way down 300 meters deep, and we said this is our interpretation, our way of paying homage to the master architect in a way. So what all these competitions do is they challenge us. There is no one way or one solution, but we try to get into the heart of the matter. And the reason that we do the ideas competitions in particular is that in that case it allows us that kind of freedom and flexibility. So, so for each of them, a different thing. In case of the Central Park, the book studio, which is in the Central Park, one of the concepts is about raising up on an elevated bridge or an ambulatory. There is a concern for the ecology and with not to disrupt any trees and let it hover around as a bridge over the ground. So there have been different, there is always a main priority that we stick to, and we don't compromise on that. And that is how we build up our approaches. But you will ask me that then what was so consistent about this, that you're talking about a painting and translating it. I am taking this whole thing about this exercise of painting and translation, which we even give as a basic design exercise in first and second years when we teach. It's that it opens up the mind. It opens up the mind, and I feel as a student, an open mind as a student, why not? Even when we grow up, the open mind is something which lets us do some miraculous things, and that is what these exercises help us do. So for me, it is always going back and forth all the time with, and that's how that's what you may call it, is the processes in a way.
Yes, sir. So first of all, good evening to everyone and to SET University for this amazing initiative. It is indeed fascinating to hear from great minds. So like what I learn is that initially we must give approach to creativity, and once the creativity is sorted at a mental level, then we must move on to practicality and merge the same. Am I right?
Of course, we do have to resolve the practical matters also, but you know, like we do try and resolve the structure in most of this competition. We do give some idea of what would be the structural principle, but of course, you will again ask me that by taking the Guggenheim spiral all the way 300 meters down, now how are you going to ventilate that space? I do not have an answer for that, but you know, so. But there will be answers for that also. I'm sure there will be answers. But then there was a nice way whereby we felt that at some point of time we could reach the level of the metro station, you know, which would allow you to plug into the building right from the metro level. So of course, I was very much impressed with drawings of Peter Cook, and I mean, they have always remained my inspiration. And so I think there is a need for architects, and I have always remained in that realm wherein, to be very honest, I haven't built much, but most of it is an academic career with a bit of building and research and some documentation and publication to go with it. That's the sort of practice that I have in a way, so which kind of supports it also.
Yes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Actually, taking that little question further, you know, and especially telling from the student's perspective, you know, at some point, because we have been generally within the academic realm, and there are kind of quite a few students also who have appeared for this. I was wondering, because you said you have this whole set of imageries, right, which are there within this, you know, at this point, and how does one select which imagery would be an appropriate one? You know, because I'm very sure that people who are all here would have a different sort of imageries in their head, you know, but how does one choose, and how does one rationalize, you know, those imageries and then develop further?
That's a great question. I think most of the learning that I did in art was all self-taught by when I was at Pratt, by visiting museums and sitting in those galleries, and then I took a course at the Cooper Union School of Art, and that is where the love of it all started. And so most of it was self-taught. One of the ways of selecting the painting and why I went for selecting in particular non-objective art was that Zaha Hadid at that time was also exploring Kazimir Malevich, and she was very much she had just started building her works and doing interior projects and on a smaller scale. And I happened to hear her lecture, and that is where it all started, through interactions. And of course, then I followed her work, and then I found that there must be a reason why she follows this non-objective art by the Russian constructivists, because it is geometric in nature. That is very. I found that was one of the criteria, was that it's geometric in nature. The other is that it doesn't remain confined to the limits of the paper or the field of the paper. It always looks like it is going to flow out of the picture frame, and that for us as architects opens up a new challenges of how I want to connect one thing with something else which is beyond my sight. So it opens up this layer of contextual relationships. I thought that was one way. And the other was that they are flat colors which are applied. They are flat colors and flat picture planes. But at the same time, what constructivist geometry allows us to do is that it almost looks like all of these geometric planes are going to take up some kind of volumes, and they are going to start flying off in space. That was essentially a concept which was also being touted because Russia had floated its first outer space Sputnik and all that, and that is why there was this fascination with space also, and that is why they were talking about third dimension, fourth dimension. So I believe this kind of constructivist geometry allows me to do that, or probably because I followed Zaha a lot in her initial years, I'm saying, not in her later works, her initial work. That is why it was much easier for me to follow in her mold and start doing some things, and as well as trying to find my own take in some ways or the other. That's why the iterations of Malevich and then trying to find new and newer ways of exploring it. So in a way, I'm trying to build up a sort of a library or a Pictionary of images, which at my own free will, I am able to recollect and use it to my, but it would be very intuitive, Jay. I cannot completely answer your question as to when I decide or when that happens, but it does happen at a point wherein I feel that, okay, this is worth it. Let me, try that out. So. And it works.
I kind of understand, because when we used to work with some of the artists, the idea is that when does one stop? So that was one of the questions which were also basically this, that when somebody is producing artwork, it can go on for years or it can just finish in a day. When is it that somebody decides? I think so. Those are the kind of points which also comes with experience, with time, with wisdom, with something which is inside, which tells you. So I do understand at some point what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And in this method of working, what I had to remain very aware was that I shouldn't literally translate the painting into an architectural composition, because that is when I would lose it all. So there was always a conscious attempt to take only the bare essence of it and not straight away project it as volumetric kind of analysis.
So there are two options. Either Ruturaj, we can take a question from you, or there is one question from Kiran Kumar.
I think that we'll take that Libeswood's question, because I would like to know.
I'm also a little curious about the Libya's food. So he says that Percy, you studied under Libya's Wood, in Pratt, and I was also kind of wow, And it says, would it be possible to share your experience studying under him and how he has influenced your process? And also a little bit about Libya's Wood, and it'll be nice to hear like that.
Sorry, can I just extend the question a bit?
Yes, Kiran. Yes.
Hi, sir. It's wonderful to see your work and a great inspiration for particularly academics who are drawing. I just wanted to ask, because you're not just drawing to communicate, because like Woods, he's questioning. You're pushing imagination through drawing, right? It's not drawing to just to communicate. Your drawings are also trying to that you're pushing imagination itself, not just to communicate. Unless you're using it in practice, it's mostly to communicate. But in the sense you're pushing the boundary of space itself. So I could see, as a fan of Lebesgue myself, I thought, is there any learning from Woods when you studied under him?
Well, I mean, in his class, usually it was this abstract themes, this war-ravaged cities. I mean, that time the war in Croatia was on, and I mean, this war-torn imageries, and the way he would ask us that, okay, this is a ravaged kind of a city. Now, how do we rebuild it? But while rebuilding it, we have to take what is left over of the city and almost try to prop it up, try to prop up things in their own way, things flying in the sky and that. And so I as a teacher, I mean, he would not be speaking much. He would be showing us these beautiful drawings. But then the thing was, he never wanted us to essentially draw in his kind of a mold. He would encourage us to explore something beyond. But then what he did open up was that there was another kind of a future for architects, that they could go into building set designs, and the way he did and all that. So that was a big revelation for us. And yeah, it was a great. There were two people, in fact. There were two people who inspired me. It was Zahadid and Lebes Woods both. I took a studio with Zaha and Lebes Woods, but I found them both very, very different in their own ways, though there are a lot of commonalities between them. It was very interesting, and being with both of them. Yes, yes, the beauty of those drawings is so captivating. I mean, and yeah, so it was not a full-fledged studio I took with him, but it was more of a small workshop of about a week or so, and that is all I could capture from it. I mean, most of the time we were so mesmerized by the drawings and the beauty of them. Yeah.
Thank you.
That helps.
One more small detail, Kiran, I want to add, because I took the Architectural Futures course with under Percy sir, which sort of continues from that, a bit of that legacy. But what was great about that, it was an elective, and it used to kind of consume us fully, because one is, of course, Percy sir used to insist that we work on it almost every day. And there was so everything else sort of went completely for the toss, the studio and all. We were fully focused for that semester on the elective. But what it did was that there was no real beginning or the end to that elective. There was a bit of a prompt, I think, from two or three good talks that Percy sir used to give at the beginning of that particular elective, and there was one more input lecture in between. Which was to see this set of analog slides, on those carousels, in a very dark room, image after image of, and it was very surreal because it was completely dark, that auditorium, and Percy sir would talk about these images, and it didn't matter really whether there were people in the auditorium or not, because it was just like this fantastic drawings that but that was that, and then we were free to do what we wanted. So what was great about that exercise was that it didn't determine where it started and where it ended. It produced a lot of work, repetitive, overlaid sort of work, but it has had no precise agenda also. So then if suppose I start moving towards a certain kind of imagery or certain way of drawing, I would get that input from Percy sir on, like, where to lead next. And there will be little nudges and very few hints on the way. But it was also very repetitive. We would make a drawing again and again. I think little bit I want to ask the Percy sir also, that if you see his work also, there's a lot of repeating the drawing. Is it something to do with that? That you have a very, I do it a lot. I mean, that helps me.
Yeah, it's a lot of iterations. It's a lot of iterations, and always it is going back to something and finding something new within. I mean, that has been my way. Probably I'm not an original, one can say, but I've always I've always been into iterations and several ways of doing something in different ways. And that is probably from the process, the first question that you asked was that I would have on my table certain set of images line, which have always been with me. I mean, since the last 20, 30 years, and then trying to just reimagine them in different ways till today. I mean, and it is exhaustive and it never ends. So that is how it works. And for that, I mean, for your futures class, I have to thank Professor Bill Menking, who was there, who passed away recently during coronavirus. But he was the one who opened up this exercise. And the other thing about this exercise was that the submission could be an installation, the submission could be an artwork, the submission could be an insert within the school at certain place. So the way the submission was also very open for the students. So they would have fun time, you know, with that. And though being an elective, they would almost treat it like a studio, as Ruturaj says. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it all matters about how you engage the students, and I mean, we work with them. Thanks.
Does anyone have would like to basically kind of ask any questions, or it will be actually interesting to know from people if somebody has a kind of interesting observations and would want to do that. Ruturaj, do you have a question, or I can basically do the last set of a question?
Well, just one last thing, I wanted to, because I have known Percy sir largely in the capacity of an academic. And over the years, all our interactions have been in that space, but now there is also a practice, which is a very different kind of practice from anyone that I know. So I just want to kind of, before we conclude, ask him about the nature of his studio, the Red Studio, and what kind of work, because it's part workshop, part lab, part studio, so a little bit, sir, if you can.
Sure, thank you. The Red Studio was founded about a year and a half back after I left Navratna, and it was conceived as an integrated studio cum gallery space with an emphasis on furthering the boundaries of art, architecture, and design education. That remains our prime purpose behind establishing the Red Studio, because we felt there was a need for such a thing to come into existence. Because and going back to my perspective, that the disciplines of architecture, art, and design are getting increasingly intertwined together with each other in the visual culture, and that remains our prime focus at the Red Studio. We are very conscious about the overlapping domains of art and architecture and the impact that cross-disciplinary approach to education is going to have in the coming years. And we wanted to prepare ourselves for that. We wanted to prepare our students and professionals, young professionals, for that. And that is why we have come into existence. Now, how do we carry on our different ways of doing things? So we have multiple formats. We do it through lectures, we do it through presentations, we do it through organizing seminars, we do it through discussions. We had workshop on writing and research with Ruturaj some time back, and holding seminars. We want to take it even further, and we intend to broaden the horizons of architectural discourse, which we feel needs to be opened up, and more people need to get engaged into this in order to come up with some very fruitful suggestions. And so our idea is also to have groups of people who would be interested in having discussions and debates on architectural discourse and the future of it, and enabling multidisciplinary exposure to students as well as professionals is also our prime goal, because we feel we can make a difference in that area, and that is where we are trying. So our domains of work can be, we have several modules of workshops which are ranging from foundation, basic design and studio workshops, to art appreciation workshops, to architectural futures workshops, through structuring courses, helping the colleges structure their courses and giving them inputs on that is also one of our objective. And we also design electives. We have theory modules also, which are to do with history theories of modernism, postmodernism, deconstruction, minimalism, and we explore that also. We have several workshop modules. We call it architecture. It may be offered as a winter course during the winters at SEPT. We are aiming for that. And then one of our most important, we had incidentally, we had this same exhibition. It was a live exhibition held in February before this outbreak, just before this outbreak in Baroda at the Space Studio. This same exhibition, it had a few more things like an installation. There was another installation within there because it's very site specific. So our idea is to keep holding these exhibitions, and we feel that that is what could make a difference. So we are trying to reach out through these exhibitions. Competitions, research and publications also form an important domain, because we are not necessarily essentially a built practice. We don't do much of built works, to be very honest. So we are going to keep taking up these competitions, keep working with groups of students, keep inspiring them. It brings about generally a great vibe among students. And after our first award-winning competition that we did for the Guggenheim, we have been having so much of an interest, and there have been groups of students always willing to work on newer projects, because it also gives them that necessary leeway and that freedom from their normal everyday studios, and it helps open up their mind, and it gives them the flexibility. So there, we feel that that is where we could make a difference, because that is becoming a regular feature with us in a way. And that is probably the data that we are accumulating for our future exhibitions in a way. And at some point of time, we may be able to dissect that and see where it is going.
Thank you very much, Percy. There's a kind of a science experiment, that how do you create ripple in the lake which is more lasting, or rather long lasting. So they say instead of throwing a very big mass of stone, you actually throw lots of stone at lots of places, and in some sense, I think your position is something like that, So what you're doing is you're inspiring so many young minds, in some sense, at multiple levels. And that is the one which is going to create a ripple effect, at this point, and which will be kind of a long lasting. And I feel that's a quite a contribution. I always feel that the young minds, it is like I keep on saying this a lot of time again and again. It's like a movie Inception, you put a seed of thought in them at a very young point or at a very crucial stage of their life. And that kind of evolves, into a full-fledged, let's say, oasis, at this point. So I think that's what educators and academicians largely do at this point.
Yes, and that's our reward. Yeah.
Yeah, true. And it only shows after many years, after 20 years, 30 years, when you kind of see some of the glimpses of what you have done and says, oh, wow, and you kind of subtly smile, there's a little smile and you feel, yeah, it was worth it. All of this was worth it, at this point. So we are actually very thankful, for basically doing this. We have Harsh has got one question or something at this point.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Harsh.
So, I'm just wanting to thank Percy sir for letting us see your work and showcase your work through us to everyone in the world whoever is present, who might see or will see this recording over and over later on. And I will just scavenge on the words that you have used in the exhibition, but I am just going to put them in a certain order, because you have mentioned that whatever we saw right now might be unbelievable, might be unbuildable, or might be ridiculous, but all these are the chance happenings which lead all of us together right now to understand what might be sublime. So it's amazing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Percy, to
Thank you.
Ruturaj,
Thank you.
Harsh, Nidhi, Payal, and the SEP team and everybody who basically is over here, and it's good to see that people are still engaged, at some point. Of course, in a real time, we would have had chai, coffee, and a lot of snacks and all. For us, exhibition used to be one of the great places to do a lot of tryouts. So before exhibition, our team would actually say, "Ki aaj kya mangwana hai? Chalo dal vada, let's try dal vada. Oh, let's try burger. Oh, let's try basically shake." And I think so. For us, exhibition was basically trying out a lot of stuff. At this point, sorry we couldn't offer all of those. But we are very happy to see everybody over here. And still holding on the position at this point. Thank you very much. Hoping that you will spread the word, to many more people whom who would like to kind of see this exhibition. The exhibition is largely open till 30th of December, or 31st of December, as a matter of fact. So somebody can see it virtually. There'll be this entire session on the YouTube also at this point. Nauzur, you want to say something, right? Is it something? You are on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, unmute.
Hi, also.
Yeah.
Hi, Percy.
Hi.
Very, very interesting talk, though I missed a little bit in the beginning. I wanted to ask you, have you personally been ever influenced, or have you let figurative art influence your practice? Because figurative art has been in existence for all the centuries that mankind knows of, right from the stick figures right till the last century. And only in the last century did art move away from only a figurative expression to abstract, geometric, spatial, call it whatever you like, expressionist, and the like. So figurative art has been there in all the cultures, ranging from Mexico to Japan, and India in between. So has figurative art ever been a catalyst for architecture? It would have to be, since we enjoy so much old architecture.
Yeah, it would have to be, but I can say in my case, it has not been. Sadly, it has always been because probably it was an easier way for us to relate and draw that analogy and analysis, and so I always went for the non-figurative and non-objective, and not the figurative. Not that I don't appreciate that art. But in my case, it has never been. It has never been a case where I have used that as a premise in order to kickstart a concept that I want to generate for something. I haven't dwelled much in that area, to be very honest, but I'm sure it might reap very rich dividends if one would. And I will give it a thought, certainly. I will. It's a nice point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you give your, sorry, can I ask another question? Do you give your students who come to, let's say, the Red Studio, a particular piece of art and tell them to draw inspiration from that particular piece, just as an exercise?
Yeah, we have a library of about 50 to 70 works, which we have pre-selected. I'll be very honest with you, because we know that they have certain promise within them in order to get taken to the next level of architectural space making. So we do select works for them which do have a potential, so that because the time during the workshop is limited, so we don't have the luxury of taking them through. So we do give them a pre-selected work of art, and wherein there is a library of them, almost about 50-70 images, and they choose from that. But we have of course chosen them because there is a lot of potential to do.
Actually,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. We would like to basically end this session, but we would actually, it's time to kind of end the session, though we have basically a couple of questions more. You can actually ask to Percy, we can connect you to Percy, and then, Percy can take a lot of questions at this point, but it's already 6:30 and, we need to basically wrap up this session.
But Jay, take this last one.
Okay. Percy, would you like to take this? Could you comment on the drawing as a form of practice? It's from Bijoy Ramchandran.
Yeah, I think why not? Drawing could very well be a form of practice. And, because I was always intrigued by that from the very beginning. Whenever we visited the Museum of Modern Art and looking at drawings, and there are architects who make a living by making drawings. So that has always been the way that I looked at it. I don't know if that's what the question is, but I think drawing as a form of practice is very relevant, and I don't know. I haven't thought of much, but we could communicate on this. Let me go through this question a bit, because I think it requires some more thinking. But thank you, Bijoy. I think we will communicate very soon on this.
Yeah, wonderful to see your work, Percy.
Thank you,
Really,
Bijoy.
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Good. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Let's hope you all have a great weekend, possibly within the homes and the confinements of home, and, maintain some distances, right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.